Hey guys, welcome to my lunch break at work. I wanted to go through with you our paper that's due on Sunday, the Next Steps professional development paper. And I also wanted to touch base just about some of the things or topics that are covered this week and just kind of set you up for the rest of the week. So this week I'm actually going to post a few videos. This is going to be the full-length one, but there's going to be 3 follow-up videos, and each video will be an exercise for self-care. And so none of them will be more than 5 minutes long. They're probably most predominantly going to be 2 minutes long, and we'll talk a little bit about what they'll entail later. But I challenge you to put your best effort into it and see what your results are. Okay, so that being said, I want to make sure we review what your expectations are for the paper. So I set us up on this page so that you can navigate with me where to find all the specifics about the paper. So if you go into your welcome page and you scroll down, you will see this Next Steps in Professional Development paper. That is due this Sunday by 11:59. This is a general overview of the expectations to look for. But I want to run through just the different sections as far as what to specifically look at, how to kind of pull from your work experience and where you want to go to make sure that you're fully articulating a game plan for moving forward in your education and growth. Okay, so this is going to be a self-assessment. You probably have noticed that all of the papers in this class are self-assessment, and I will let you know that this is the only class that's this introspective. It is really deep, and I realize that for a lot of folk that is uncomfortable. So give me what you can. Don't feel like you have to share more than you're comfortable with, but try and dig as deep as you can going through this. Okay, so obviously you're going to start off with the title page. I don't think anyone in this class has any work to do in that area. You guys have done great as far as the cover pages. So moving on, the body is going to be sectioned off into 3 sections. The first section is where you're going to want to go and what skills are necessary there. So we have a few students who are in the human sexuality program. If you find that your areas of interest align with that, you're planning on being like a couples therapist or working in areas of youth with transition, or if you plan on going a totally different venture and working in a disabilities office at a higher ed institution, then what you're going to want to do is think about the different skill sets that are necessary for that level of work. And I caution you to not oversimplify. So you're going to deal with a lot of concerns and issues no matter what the population is. For instance, you're going to handle addiction no matter what your job role is. So if you're not comfortable with folks who have concerns around addiction, who have a history of addiction, who are presently active, that might be a skill set that you need to identify and work on. I would think about that first. So your first step is going to be to isolate or consider an area of interest that you really find yourself drawn to. It's obviously not a commitment. Like, I'm not going to follow up with you in 5 years and see if you actually got that job in transition housing or something. But it's a jumping off point as far as thinking broadly about the work you're doing. So come up with an idea as far as where you might see yourself going. It can be pretty general. It doesn't have to be very specific. But if you know you want to work with youth, or if you know you want to work with people with disabilities, or you know you want to work with people who are dealing with poverty, or people who are having medical concerns. There's a lot of folks who get into the medical social work field, and think about the different issues and skill sets that would benefit somebody working in that field. So that is generally the first section. In that first section, you're going to want to categorize those skills that you require or will hone in the meantime under the code of ethics or the issues of cultural competency as identified by the National Association of Social Workers. There are 2 documents currently in your required readings. They're both pretty heavy, although one's a pamphlet, so it's not very heavy. But the Code of Ethics, the full manual is pretty dense. So I would kind of make sure that you get a feel for how things are organized within there, and make sure you know the general overview. These are going to be reinforced over the next 3 years pretty strongly, and it's really important to know them when you sit for your LSW and LCSW. It's a huge component of being a social worker under like the licensed social worker, not just somebody who's working in social services, but somebody who is an identified social worker with the social work specific training. Does that make sense? So you're going to want to use that as a guide. If you're knowing that you're going to have a hard time with somebody who's coming from a place of difference, you might look at the sections around diversity, and if you know you're going to have a hard time working with folks who have concerns around having abuse. Okay, so I'm going to explain that a little more. I worked in the foster care system for like one of my internships, so not very long. But in that work, what I ended up doing is working a lot with the youth, but also with the foster parents and the biological parents. Both set of parents I did not continually see eye to eye on. So how are you going to work with people who are coming from different perspectives, who are maybe used to using physical means of discipline, or have a different structure as far as what's acceptable for a child? You know, some of those things are completely just perspective changes, right? So what might seem uncomfortable or challenging for you might be really commonplace for another culture. So what you're going to want to do is think about or try to project some of those issues that might come up, and how they would fall under those 2 documents, the Code of Ethics and Cultural Competency. You can even go through them to get an idea as far as like, oh yeah, I totally didn't think of that, and then continue to drill into like, how is this specific competency relevant to the work that I see myself doing. So you're going to want to keep, like, there's a lot about making sure that you're empowering people. How is that code of ethic, that mandate that we really empower people as opposed to direct people, how does that relate to the work you want to do? That type of thing. That was a really wordy explanation of the first section. The second section is going to be more about you. So you're going to look at your personal biases and think about how you're going to manage them. You know, just the first most important part. I mean, if your paper is 80% identifying the parts of yourself that you know can create barriers, I will consider this a wildly successful paper. All right, so I'm just going to say that again. If most of your paper entails looking at yourself and finding the places within yourself that might create barriers, that is phenomenal. Because this is definitely a self-development type of paper. We want to make sure that you're really honest as far as where your limitations are. So, just to put myself out there, since I know it might be hard for you to kind of say, like, no, this is something that I know is in me. For me, one of the huge barriers I had was working with folks who are in polygamous relationships. It's just something I've never been able to really understand. And so when I'm talking to somebody who has multiple partners, it becomes a little bit of a huge just chasm of difference. And it's so hard for me to understand needs and wants when a relationship doesn't fit into anything I would consider my needs or wants in my personal relationships. I grew up in a very traditional family. I am part of a fairly traditional family. Traditional-esque. But as far as the partner relationship, me and my partner are monogamous. We don't, experience things outside of the relationship. And so it's somewhat of a challenge for me to generalize that out to other styles of families. So that is what your second section is going to be. You're going to look at the pieces of yourself that don't measure up, that might cause you to judge somebody before really being able to help them. It might create a barrier to joining or meeting somebody where they are. And so then you're going to start thinking about, what can I do to navigate that or overcome it? So for that specific example, what I did is I started reading a lot of biographies from people who were in multiple partner relationships, just exposing myself to it. And, you know, it's like, if you've ever read any of the studies about people who join gangs, like, there's a reason these things exist. Like, all things meet a need. Nothing happens in a vacuum. So if somebody's in a multiple partner relationship, that relationship offers something to all of those partners that I cannot get in a monogamous relationship. And so that is kind of where I had to go with it. I had to kind of find out how these work, what needs it meets, and after I was able to really expose myself to all of the myriad of complexities and nuances with multiple partner relationships, it made a lot more sense. I actually have a few friends who are in multiple partner relationships, and it makes sense. It isn't something I would be able to do, but it meets all of their needs, and they're very, very satisfied and happy, and so it makes sense. So what you want to do is just kind of figure out how you're going to open your mind up, how you're going to be able to really navigate new waters, how you're going to work with folks of difference. And then after that, you're going to break that down in the third section. You're going to break that down into both personal goals, professional goals, and educational goals. So, for that example, an educational goal is reading the biographies, researching about multi-partner relationships. And personal goals, wasn't really a goal. I just ended up becoming friends with a few people who happen to be in multiple partner relationships. They're polyamorous, everything's happy, somebody's getting a +4 at my wedding, and that's phenomenal. So that's just something that happened. A personal goal would probably be to connect into resources that are attuned with those lifestyles and family styles, and become more open in that regard. Professionally, if there's trainings available, if there's things you can do in your workplace, if there's committees you're not involved with that you could be involved with, all things to consider as far as specific, attainable goals that would help you get to that end. I definitely would recommend looking into research, specifically when you identify a specific area that could use a little more honing, and then moving forward, once you start training, moving forward with those pieces of information as far as letting it dictate what you feel like your next goals will be. So there's tons of research on how to become more competent in all of these ways. I would just really encourage you to look into it, use those as your references, and help it give you kind of a plan to get through. What you really want to see is where you want to be at the end of this program, and in the end, during your career, not the end of your career, because that's, I don't know, very far away. So, you're going to want to just look at those different aspects of yourself and how you can grow, and what resources are out there for you to continue that development. So that's basically the paper. You're going to have 5 to 6 pages of content at the end of it. So it's going to be title page, 5 to 6 pages of you using this guide to go through your personal, and then the references page. This is your last major paper that's not a process note. And after that, we'll be looking forward to seeing your group presentations. And if you have any issues with that, or if you have any concerns about the paper, please let me know. I'm going to pause this because my lunch break is over and I have a student waiting for me. And then later on, I will add to this video and put in some pieces about self-care and that reading we had for this week. All right. I'll see you in a bit.